Let's call our Water Commission meeting to order for September 18th of 2025. I'd like to begin with roll call. Andrea, do you want to do that?
Commissioner Doba,
Here?
Commissioner Bills,
Here.
Commissioner Nelman,
Here.
Commissioner Garcia,
Here.
Commissioner Vane.
Here.
Okay, thank you. We do have a quorum. The next item on the agenda is public participation. The commission on an item that's not on the agenda. If you do wish to address the commission, please state your name and address for the record. The open meeting law prohibits us from discussing or taking action on an item that's not listed on the agenda. Commission members may, however, respond to any criticism made by those addressing the commission or ask staff to review a matter or ask that a matter be placed on a future agenda. And public comments should be limited to 3 minutes reading time. Do we have anybody for public participation? Seeing none, we will move on to the next item, which is approval of the minutes from the August 21st, 2025 meeting. And we have a healthy number of minutes from that meeting. I think we have about 9 pages. I hope you've all had an opportunity to take a look at them. And do we have any comments on the minutes, or Don?
I have one minor edit. It's on page 6, and it's about halfway down the largest paragraph. There's a sentence there that says Commissioner Bills also asked if this is all surface water used from the southern Colorado River. There is no southern Colorado River that I'm aware of in Arizona. I think the intent there is lower basin to distinguish it from upper basin versus a lower basin water use.
So it should state lower Colorado Basin then.
Yeah.
Do we have any other corrections or comments on the minutes? If not, I'll accept a motion to approve the minutes as corrected.
I move to accept the minutes as corrected.
Thank you, Rob. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? With that, the minutes are approved as corrected. We only have one item for new business today, and this is an update on the treatment facility master plan. And Lee, do you want to kick this one off, or?
Thank you for the offer. I think I'll let Mac handle this one.
Okay.
Treatment facilities master plan.
Over to Mac.
Hey, good afternoon. Mac McNamara, Engineering Section Director for Water Services. The Water Services Division hired Hazen and Sawyer, partnered with Stantec a while back to perform a treatment facility master plan. We're here this afternoon to give you an update on where we're at. And then most likely in November, we'll be back with the final master plan, probably a more in-depth presentation. And with that, I have Doug Corbrick with me with Hazen and Sawyer. He's going to go over the updates, and then we'd be happy to field any questions after that.
Great, thank you. Welcome, Doug.
Thank you, Commissioner Doba. I'm Doug Kobrick. I'm an Associate Vice President with Hazen and Sawyer, Tempe office. I've been involved with the Treatment Facilities Master Plan. Our project manager is Andrea Odegaard-Begay. She is out on vacation right now, so I'm filling in for her. Hopefully I can fulfill her role. This is a very interesting project, looking at the 2 treatment facilities that the city owns and operates. And as Mac said, I'll give you an update on how we're progressing here. I'll give a quick overview of our scope and of the treatment facilities. an update on the wastewater flow and loading projections, talk briefly about some of the emerging regulatory requirements that impact or may impact the treatment facilities. Look just very briefly at water reuse and resources considerations, share what we're taking as sort of the preliminary planning approach for the two facilities, and then just give you a quick update on the alternatives analysis and how that's all coming along. And as Max said, we're approaching the finish line, but we're not there yet. So this is still work in progress, just a caveat before I keep talking. So the purpose of the project, and this is a slide from a kickoff meeting, I think that was held with this body about a year ago, is to address the near and long-term management of wastewater and biosolids produced at the Rio de Flag and Wildcat Hill water reclamation facilities. It's an element of your strategic plan 2025 for the water services utility to address Wildcat Hill in particular, but the way the system works is those two facilities are basically intertwined. What happens at Rio de Flag affects what happens at Wildcat Hill. And so they're linked together for sure. So our scope of work includes these tasks listed here, an evaluation of the facilities as they exist and the reliability. We did a condition assessment at the Wildcat Hill facility, a somewhat more limited assessment at Rio de Flag because it's newer. Spent quite a bit of time looking at the wastewater flows and loads, which are evolving over time. As I mentioned, take a look at regulatory requirements now and in the future. Looked at the hydraulic capacity of the facilities, their ability to pass the flow that they receive. A look at the SCADA and controls at the plants. And we're in the middle right now of evaluating alternatives for the treatment processes, improvements that might be necessary at the facilities to address the existing and future needs. Some need for capacity increase. Solids disposal methods is part of our scope. Our teammate Stantec is taking the lead on that, and they're still working on their piece of it, really. So I don't have a whole lot to share on that one. And then ultimately, we'll be developing a recommended plan for improvements and implementation at the two facilities and a phasing plan. And then we also have tasks to look at staffing and training and evaluate funding requirements and financing needs. I have copies of these slides too. If you want paper copies, then I'm sure you have an electronic copy too. So what are the key treatment facility planning considerations? Well, one issue that Flagstaff faces, along with pretty much every other wastewater utility in Arizona, is increasing wastewater flows and loads. Community still growing. Even with water conservation, wastewater flows are increasing, not as fast as the loadings are increasing, because Flagstaff has a great water conservation program, a model for everybody, how well you guys have done with that. But there's still an increase in the wastewater flow to some extent, but the strength of the sewage, the amount of solids that are in a less rapidly increasing stream of water, is causing the concentration to increase. The facility's age and condition is definitely a factor. As I mentioned in a minute, Wildcat Hill was originally built in 1971, so it's over 50 years old now, and by the time any major work happens there, it'll be pushing 60. As somebody who's past 60, I can tell you that pushing 60 is not the greatest, but it's okay. And then there are these emerging regulatory requirements, the biosolids issues, and then operability and reliability are important concern, and we'll also look at costs. So all those factors go into our evaluation. This is an overview of the Rio de Flag plant. You may be familiar with it already, but just very briefly, it performs the Bardenfo nutrient removal process. It's a biological treatment process, and north is up on this slide. And if you look at the basins that are sort of to the left side of the slide, the flow comes in at the primary sludge, at the primary settling basins. There's a pump station between those, the primary clarifiers. Goes through the aeration basins that perform the Bardenfo process. Final clarifiers are at the south end. Plant gradually runs downhill to the south. And then inside the operations building are the filters and the UV disinfection system, along with the blowers and equipment and office space and all the rest. So this plant has served you well since 1993. Also point out that the flow to the plant comes from an influent pump station, which is south of I-40 there, alongside the Rio de Flag wash. And there's an interceptor sewer that runs through that area and passes by this pump station, and the pump station pulls flow out of that interceptor and sends it up the hill to the Rio de Flag plant. Wildcat Hill, as I mentioned, was built originally in 1971. It's a different treatment process. It's been a couple different treatment processes in its life. Right now it performs the IFAS system, which is the integrated fixed film activated sludge process, which means there are suspended media discs in the basin that provide additional space for biological activity to occur. That plant also has primary clarifiers, then the IFAS basin, which is the biological process, then secondary clarifiers and filtration and disinfection with chlorine at Wildcat. And then that reclaimed water, a portion of it is pumped out to reclaimed water customers. You can see at the bottom of the view there, there's a couple of solar installations there also. So those are the two plants. You've gotten a lot of good service out of them. They are facing increasing challenges with the wastewater flows and loads. As I said, population is increasing, even with water conservation helping dampen the flow increases. You're still getting some flow and increases, and the strength is increasing significantly. Another thing that's a concern is that the peak events that stress the plant probably the most, especially Wildcat Hill, appear to be increasing in severity. There was an event during the snowmelt season a year ago, maybe it's 2 years ago now, but it caused over 12 MGD flow to Wildcat Hill, which is rated at 6, and that caused a lot of stress on the plant and the folks who work there. And that really is sort of the worst case scenario when it rains on top of snow that's already melting. That's what generates runoff, and some of that infiltrates into your collection system. And there's reason to believe that damage from the fires on the watershed are probably intensifying that runoff. So that's a definite concern with the influent flow rates, especially to Wildcat. So there are a lot of changes already happening at Rio de Flag that will help with Wildcat Hills issues. As I mentioned, the two plants are interconnected. So the flow that's coming down the sewer that goes by the Rio de Flag plant, if it doesn't get pumped to Rio de Flag, it ultimately makes its way to Wildcat Hill and gets treated there. So Rio de Flag was developed as a scalping plant. And what we mean by a scalping plant is that it was really created to pull off a portion of the wastewater flow, that being the scalp, and create a supply of reclaimed water in that portion of the city. And so the solids and the residuals from the operation of Rio de Flag have always been returned back to the sewer and ultimately make their way to Wildcat Hill. So Rio de Flag removes these solids and the BOD, and some of that is consumed in the process, but a significant share of it goes back to the collection system and goes to Wildcat Hill and basically gets treated again. And it's been like that for a long time, and it's actually not uncommon in Arizona to have this kind of an arrangement, a scalping plant to create reclaimed water. But that puts an additional load on Wildcat. So the other thing is that Rio de Flag has been being base loaded at a sort of a constant 2 million gallon a day flow rate, regardless of what's happening in the system. And there was some question whether there was going to be ever really 4 MGD generated in the Rio de Flag watershed or sewer shed, especially given the conservation program success. As part of some of the other planning work that's going on, though, we have confirmation now that 4 MGD can be fully used. And so there's been a change of direction that's already in motion to operate Wildcat at its full 4 MGD capacity when the flows are there. And that will take a load off of Wildcat. And then also Rio de Flag, as you know, I'm sure, is in the process of developing an on-site biosolids processing operation with the dryer project. And that will prevent the solids that have been treated and removed from being returned back to the sewer systems. That will also reduce the loading on Wildcat Hill and actually kind of help extend that plant's capacity. So that's a big change. We're going to capture that in this facility plan. And just something to point out, the cost of wastewater plants is just going up and up and up. And basically, a gallon per day of treatment capacity right now costs about $25 to $35 each. So a 2 MGD wastewater plant has a sort of a street value of $50 to $75 million. So by operating all of Rio de Flag, you're basically recapturing that value and not having to add that at Wildcat as the flows continue to increase. So that's a good thing. So we spent quite a bit of time looking at the flows in the system and the loadings and the wastewater characteristics and the sampling results. And so we've developed a new set of flow projections for Wildcat and for Rio de Flag. So ultimately, Rio de Flag would stay at its existing capacity of 4 MGD, and the rest of the flow would wind up at Wildcat. And really, we size these plants based on the average day of the maximum month. So maximum month flow, the Wildcat Hill MMF of 6.3 MGD for a planning year of 2045, which is our planning horizon for the project. So Wildcat Hill right now is rated at 6, but that 6 is based on wastewater from years ago that was a lot less concentrated than it is right now. So I can't tell you that Wildcat's all set at 6 MGD the way it exists right now, because that's 6 MGD of a much stronger waste. And then looking at the bottom of the slide, the Wildcat Hill reclamation plant influent concentrations are projected still to be at or over 300 milligrams per liter of both biochemical oxygen demand, which is like the organic strength of the sewage, and also total suspended solid. So that's a higher than typical strength wastewater, although there are many other plants in Arizona that are seeing something in that ballpark as concentrations increase. And then also your ammonia load is pretty high. Ammonia nitrogen at 47 milligrams per liter is on the high end of sort of the typical range. So the plant needs to denitrify. That drives a lot of the treatment process considerations at the plants, is the requirement to remove nitrogen. So I mentioned that at the outset of the project, we did condition assessment work at the 2 plants, and there's a lot of detail on that, which I'm not going to get into now. But just some basic context on Rio de Flag. As I mentioned, it was built in '93 as a 4 MGD treatment plant. It's basically that same plant now. It still has the Bardenfeld process. There have been various improvements over the years since then, and the on-site solids processing project is in development now. Most of the plant's over 30 years old, but overall it's in good condition, and it can justify a rehab as opposed to a replacement. So the structures are overall pretty good. I've got an example here of a structure that's got some cracking. There's a sludge collector there that has, obviously the coating needs to be replaced. Those are the filters, which are in generally good condition, and those are some of the blowers that we took a look at during our condition assessment. So the plant is aging and some equipment needs to be replaced, but overall the condition is good at Rio de Flag. There'll be a lot more detail about that in our report. Wildcat Hill, the situation is a little more difficult. The original 3 MGD plant was built 54 years ago. Got expanded to, I said, a nominal 6 MGD. It was called 6 MGD at the time because that's probably what it was. There was a major project circa 2005 to make the conversion to the IFAS process, which intensified the treatment process to get more capacity out of the plant, basically as it existed. And that was useful. That's been in operation now for 20 years. But there are a lot of components of that plant that are 40 or 50 years old or more, and they're showing the signs. So there's quite a bit of equipment that is in need of replacement. There are some portions of the structures that are showing their age and need for rehabilitation at least. I should mention, just as another point of comparison, that a lot of the projects we're doing these days are rehabilitations or evaluations of existing treatment facilities. There was a wave of wastewater treatment plants built in Arizona back in the 80s, and they're all I still kind of think of them as new, but they're 40 years old. And so uh, a lot of them have similar issues where the concrete is starting to show uh, some deterioration, cracking. It needs a rehab at least. And certainly that extends to Wildcat, and Wildcat's actually about 10 years, 15 years older than a lot of these other plants. So you've gotten a good 55 years out of it so far, and it'll be a number of years before anything major can happen there, given the time it takes to design and build something. So you will have gotten a good 60 years of service life out of Wildcat Hill, whatever the next step is. So our condition assessment results show that a lot of the equipment is at or past its useful lifespan. Plant process operation has its challenges, as I mentioned, the severe peak flows and problems with equipment outages. I have to stop here and say, the fact that your plants like routinely comply with all their permit requirements is a great testament to the skill and dedication of your operations team and the great work that those guys do. They're the ones that get it done, like they say in that Granger commercial. They are in there making sure that the plants work and that the permits are met. And so you're not having violations, but that doesn't mean that the plant is in need of some significant help. So our overall conclusion is that much or all of that plant will need to be replaced over the coming years with new construction designed to meet current and future needs. And just very preliminarily, we're looking at maybe a sort of a 10-year phase-in period for planning and design to happen to get to the point where a replacement for much of Wildcat or all could be implemented. Talk about the emerging regulatory requirements a little bit. So as I said, both plants have consistently produced Class A+ reclaimed water, meet the bad cat standards that are part of the Aquifer Protection Permit Program, and they comply with aquifer water quality standards that apply. And as I said, that really is a tribute to the skill and hard work of the O&M team. There's a lot happening on the regulatory front now that isn't going to make it any easier. ADEQ just recently updated its aquifer water quality standards to make them more congruent with the federal drinking water standards. Without getting into too far into the weeds, the basic purpose of the Aquifer Protection Permit Program is to protect aquifer water quality. And the sort of the benchmark for that is making sure that our aquifers remain drinking water quality aquifers, which translates to meeting federal drinking water maximum contaminant levels. So for example, the MCL, maximum contaminant level for nitrogen, for nitrate, is 10 milligrams per liter. Your sewage has 50 in it. That's why the plants have to denitrify. That's been a requirement for quite a while now. Just this summer, ADQ, for the first time in like 20 years, brought out a new set of additional aquifer water quality standards. This little table is a snip directly off the DEQ website. And you can see that they've lowered the standard for arsenic. They've created standards for bromate and chlorite and haloacetic acids, and made some tweaks to the microbiological contaminant requirements. And they've tightened up the total trihalomethanes standard. That's the disinfection byproducts that are formed by chlorine disinfection. And now there's a standard for uranium. So that's one step. That's one shoe that's dropping. But then, of course, the next shoe that's out there that everybody in the water industry is concerned about is the PFAS shoe. The feds this year, issued drinking water MCLs for certain species of PFAS, 6 out of the 14 or 40,000 different varieties of PFAS that exist out there, the forever chemicals that are in the news so much. And those MCLs could translate into new aquifer protection permit standards also. But we don't really know where that's going at this point because DEQ doesn't know where that's going at this point. One thing, there's some political considerations going on these days that could lead to rollback of certain environmental standards. In fact, EPA has already pulled back some of the MCLs that they brought out. There could be more. DEQ has made a very carefully worded, vague statement about their intent to manage PFAS in the future. We don't know what they're going to do. I can tell you that my third sub bullet here, essentially all wastewater plants have some amount of PFAS in their effluent, even if their drinking water is free of PFAS. And so this is an issue that's emerging for every wastewater plant in the state. You know, there's nothing about Flagstaff that means you're like a PFAS hot zone compared to other wastewater plants that I'm aware of. We have a couple other clients that have PFAS-free groundwater. They've been serving it for years, but they still have PFAS in the effluent from their treatment plants. And they both were planning to do recharge projects, and they have both put the brakes on right now because they're trying to figure out what to do. They don't want to put PFAS effluent into their PFAS-free groundwater. So it's a problem for everybody. We're aware of it. It can't solve it in this room today, that's for sure. But that is the big hammer that's hanging out there over everybody in their treatment plants right now. And also for biosolids. So EPA did a risk assessment on relating to PFAS and biosolids. It got a lot of attention. It got some complaints from some people. They created a very specific scenario of a family living on a farm, farming that farm and eating the food they were growing. And basically they came up with a risk assessment that said that 1 part per billion of PFAS in the biosolids was enough to have an unacceptably high cancer risk. Now, this isn't a regulation. This is just a risk assessment. And they immediately caught a lot of flack for that. But nonetheless, it's just an example of how low these limits are to be toxicity free with respect to PFAS. And there, again, there's concern that risk assessment could migrate into a new regulation affecting biosolids or not. Don't know. So that's another thing that's out there relating to PFAS. And as I say here, the political situation, which we hear about all the time, could lead to a rollback or a delay of federal PFAS regulations. But it's out there. We're trying to, be aware of the realities that exist. But unfortunately, there's a fair amount of uncertainty right now about what's going to come. And then we come to water reuse and resources considerations. You already reuse a fair amount of your reclaimed water. As you may know, DEQ updated the water recycling rules about 5 years ago to legalize direct potable reuse of reclaimed water. We've had indirect potable reuse through recharge and other approaches for a long time. And since they legalized DPR, they've been in a rulemaking process ever since to define what requirements would apply for advanced water purification to create a DPR worthy product. And it's going to be extremely expensive. But despite that, the ongoing drought in the Colorado River and our general water shortages, especially down where I live in the valley, have spurred a lot of interest in DPR. Everywhere from the city of Phoenix, which is out there making no bones about their intent to spend several $billions to develop AWP facilities, including 60 MGD at the main wastewater plant at 91st Avenue, which they're estimating right now at about $3.5 billion. So if you do the math there, that's $50 to $100 per GPD of capacity after the wastewater is treated. So that's on top of that 25 to 35 I was talking about earlier. So you multiply 100 by 6 million and you start to get some pretty big numbers, for example, if you were trying to put in the Wildcat Hill context. So it's very costly, many technical challenges, but there's a ton of work proceeding on many different fronts. Tucson's talking about doing it. Phoenix is talking about doing it. Even small utilities like with 1 or 2 MGD of effluent are talking about doing it. And everybody's situation differs. Everybody has their own unique problems or challenges that motivate them to varying degrees to go down this path. And so, typical reclaimed water as we've known it, which we've always been very proud of, that's been reused very beneficially and never been any issues, is now just source water for advanced water treatment processes. And for example, membrane filtration would be an initial step common to most AWP process trains. And so that does circle back, why does that relate to what we're doing now? For example, we have an alternative among our process evaluation that looks at a membrane bioreactor as one of the treatment processes that we're considering. And that's a membrane separation process that would actually check one of like 9 process boxes that need to be checked for AWP, but it does produce better quality water and has value for DPR if that ever became a thing here. So bringing this now to the realities of the 2 facilities. So the preliminary plan, as we see it for Rio to Flag, I've already mentioned a lot of this, is make full use of the existing 4 MGD as the flows from the sewer shed necessitate. So that pump station will pull off the flow that's coming by in the sewer until it reaches the 4 MGD level that the plant can handle, with some peaking also considered. The biosolids be processed on site there and disposed of from Rio to Flag without going over to Wildcat. The BART info process works well. It has sufficient capacity for 4 MGD, even at the projected increased strength of the wastewater. We say rehabilitate the existing plant to extend its service life and no further expansions during this planning period. Wildcat Hill, we're still working on our evaluation there. We do think that most of the plant has reached the end of its service life and the facility will need to be replaced. As I mentioned, sort of a 10-year program to sort of plan and design the replacement for the plant. So by the time that's done, the plant will be well past 60 years old, and I think you will have gotten your value out of that plant. And again, the changes at Rio are going to help Wildcat. The flow projection that I showed you earlier is 6.3 MGD for the max month flow at Wildcat, but the peak events remain a concern. Those 12 MGDs are not something that the plant really is intended to handle as it exists. So that's definitely a planning consideration in the future. We're looking at several different treatment process options with respect to the biological process. And our teammate Stantec is still working on the biosolids options. So just a little bit about what we're looking at for treatment at Wildcat. We started out with a wide roster of potential treatment processes, some well-proven, some a little too unproven. We worked in conjunction with city staff to narrow the field of options to, I guess what I'd say would be realistic possibilities. We did a multi-criteria decision analysis to reduce the options to 3 finalists, which are the BART info process, which is what Rio to Flag has, and your staff already knows how to operate successfully. It's a very robust method of removing nitrogen. Densified activated sludge, which looks a lot like traditional wastewater treatment as we know it, but with an intensified process with a thicker wastewater in the basins, and then the membrane bioreactor, which I mentioned, which is a totally different look, and I'll get a little more detail on that in a second. We're doing process modeling of each of these to determine the design criteria so we can compare them. And then there are a few common considerations for all 3. The sludge in Flagstaff, due to the cold temperatures, is not the most readily settling wastewater sludge tends to be fluffier than what we would have down in Phoenix when it's 105 out and the wastewater comes in and it's already 95 degrees. When it's 10 here, it's a little different situation. So we think all these alternatives ought to have an anaerobic selector basin at the head of the process, which will control filaments and improve settleability. And a big question is whether the city continues to have primary clarifiers or not at these plants, because they have their pluses or minuses. So that's just a couple of things we're looking at. And then here's just a little bit more about the three alternatives, and I'm not taking any deeper than this in this meeting. I mentioned BART info, though. It's a similar process as at Rio to Flag. There's multiple stages there that use biological processes to remove the nitrogen. And, one plus would be that you'd have two plants that operate basically the same way with BART info. Densified activated sludge, the real strength of this process is that you cultivate a population of the microbes in the wastewater plant that do the breakdown of the waste that are readily settlable. So those two beakers in that photo at the bottom of this middle column here, the beaker on the right is a sample of typical mixed liquor from a typical wastewater plant after it's had 5 minutes to settle. And the beaker on the left is also after 5 minutes, actually 2 minutes if you look at the little time scale down at the bottom, from a densified activated sludge plant. So it drops much quicker, and so you can get a lot more capacity out of your clarifiers and your aeration basins. And then the alternative 3 is a membrane bioreactor. And the membrane bioreactor operates at even more concentrated than densified activated sludge, so the basins are smaller. It uses these membranes and these modules that are racked up into cassettes and basically suck the water through those membranes and out and leave the solids behind, and then those are recirculated again through the process. And because it's membrane separation, you get the highest effluent quality that way. You have the lowest solids content. And so that has value in some cases. Sometimes it doesn't have any value really because your effluent is already low turbidity, but this is even lower by a factor of about 10. And it's also the most intensified process, so smallest footprint in concept, fewer costs for basin construction and so on. And as I mentioned, it might be helpful in a future where AWP becomes an interest, but that's not really right now. So that's what we're looking at. And then our next steps here, I'm wrapping it up here, is we're going to finish this evaluation of the biological alternatives. Our teammate Stantec will finish the biosolids analysis. We will knit those results together to develop an integrated recommendation, whole plant solution for both plants working together. We'll look at how those projects could fit onto your site, take a look at the costs on a high level, and then we'll present all that in a report, and that's all going to happen by November, according to Mac. So, but anyway, those are our next steps from here to completion. We are well along the track here, but we're not quite there yet. And that's all I had to present. I appreciate you listening to me drone on, and I'd be happy to take any questions or comments that the commissioners may have.
Thank you, Doug. Any questions from the commission? Don?
I have a question related to something you said earlier in your presentation. It has to do with peak events increasing in severity, and I think you related it to heavy rain, heavier than normal rain runoff during the winter, rain on snow runoff during the winter. But it also strikes me that there are a couple of other components that are impacted by how the city is being developed and by where the city is located in relationship to at-risk national forest lands. There's been a lot of effort over the last couple of decades to mitigate runoff from fire scars from from fire burn areas
Mhm.
in the national forest. And also the city of Flagstaff itself has probably significantly increased its urban footprint on the environment locally with a lot of, new roads, a lot of impermeable, parking lots and other, developments uh, that represent a significant uh, potential for adding additional runoff to to a peak flow event that might not otherwise have occurred. And I'm wondering, in particular, is there been any attempt on the part of the city to look at those two components? I know the city has put a fair amount of work into mitigating runoff in uh, some of the recent fires over the last decade or so, and those evidently are working pretty successfully. But I'm thinking more in terms of urban runoff and how to maybe better manage that.
Not involved in our project, but maybe Lee or Matt could address that.
Yeah, thank you for the question, Commissioner Bills. I can field that question. Our SCADA IS team has been installing flow monitors in different reaches of the sewer throughout the city to identify where we're having the most infiltration and inflow. This past year, we didn't get a lot of good data because we didn't get snow nor a monsoon season, but we're gearing up for it. We have some data that shows that we do have inflow coming in from certain areas, and I can't speak to the details right now. I still need to review it with the team. But we are in the process of finding out where it's coming from so that we can isolate it, and we'll eventually chase it back upstream to see where it's coming from.
Thank you. The other question I had has to do with a comment that was made relating to the city of Flagstaff's wells and some of the recharge projects that they have planned, and those recharge projects being put on hold because of the potential of inducing PFAS from surface runoff into an essentially clean groundwater resource. And I'm wondering, maybe this is more directed to better directed to the city, but I'm wondering if the city is doing any screening of wells for PFAS, particularly in relationship to the inner city wells. And is the city looking at results from some of the other developments downstream that may have those same issues? Places like Black Building Park, for example.
Let me clarify what I said. I'll let Mac or Lee answer probably 3/4 of that, but I was not saying that Flagstaff has this issue where they have decided to not do recharge because of PFAS. I was saying that's some of our other clients elsewhere. So I don't know one way or the other about that situation in Flagstaff. I'm just illustrating that a lot of other utilities also have this concern about PFAS in their wastewater. So I wasn't speaking to Flagstaff. As for the rest
Thank
of it,
you.
I'd let
Thank you
these
for
gentlemen.
clarifying that. Shannon, do you have anything to add?
Lee and I might be able to address it.
Aaron, do you want to go ahead or you want me to field this one?
You can go ahead, Lee, and then if I could add something, if it might help. Go ahead, though.
Sounds good. You can pick up where I leave off or things I forget. So City of Flagstaff has done monitoring for PFAS in all of our sources with the UCMR. That's the I'm drawing a blank on it, but it's a contaminant monitoring rule. It's by the EPA. And I think we're at number 7 now, and we have found PFAS in one of our sources. It's our EPDS that involves Lower Lake Mary Wellfield and the Upper Lake Mary, but that is the only one to date. And we believe it's probably the Upper Lake Mary where there's human contact with the water and not coming from the aquifer in the Lower Lake Mary Wellfield. And to address the second part of your question as to whether we have any recharge wells, we do not have any recharge wells and currently don't have plans to construct one.
Thank you. Aaron, did you have anything to add?
Maybe just that, I understand there was one sample where PFAS was detected, but that is out of, you know, probably close to 100 or more taken throughout that UCMR series over many years. And I don't know if there was a follow-up sample to confirm, the one detection that we had from that Upper Lake Mary or Lower Lake Mary Wellfield area. And the other part of that is just this, we don't have recharge wells per se, but there's absolutely, recharge happening. And Don, you know that just as well as anyone. Just because of our geology and there's been a lot of sampling of other constituents over time down gradient of our Rio to Flag water reclamation plant. So we know the recharge is happening. We haven't delayed any recharge projects because we're not in violation of any Safe Drinking Water Act standards or any discharge standards. So but it's something that has come to the attention of our city council, as some of you know. So, we always say that there's a water management benefit, and if there's a water quality concern, we could solve that with treatment. So, thank you.
Thank you for the additional clarification. I think the main problem was I just misheard Doug's original statement on that particular, yeah, that particular issue. Yeah. Maybe, Aaron, I can re-ask the last part of that question. It has to do with whether or not the city of Flagstaff has access to and is taking advantage of any of the water quality sampling done by other developments in and around Flagstaff, like Black Buildoni Park.
And by taking advantage, you mean just reviewing the data they've collected and whether they have any detections of PFAS or unregulated contaminants?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not sure if our team has looked at what is being found in that area. I did utilize the federal database to look in our area, and I actually didn't see any hotspots, in this area of the state. So that's just me personally, and not, talking to like Jolene, our regulatory compliance section director, for example. So I don't have a great answer for you. But anyone could look at that website to see what is detected around Flagstaff.
Okay, well, thank you all for responding to the questions and the additional clarification.
Thanks, Don. Do we have any other questions from the commission?
Flagstaff Water Group has been looking at new technology that's currently coming out. And I'm wondering, how do you assess that? Because this new technology is much more modular in design. So the plans for the future, maybe 10, 20 years out, wouldn't have these large facilities with large concrete structures. They would be installed in units, and basically if a truck container would act as a module of treatment. And how would that be included in your analysis for the future? We've also been looking at biochar as a pretreatment for release of water, for treatment of reclaimed water before it gets released into the environment, and some other possibilities. So
this is kind of new, but how do you, over the next 5 years, there'll be stuff coming out I don't know anything about, we don't know anything about. How do you take that into account? Because this kind of technology could save the city tens and 20s and 30s and hundreds of millions of dollars. So, and end up with higher quality water perhaps. So.
I can take a shot at that. So it's a good question. It's tricky. Currently, right now, we're looking at proven processes, right, to evaluate. Of course, we're always open ears. Like Doug said, we're probably like in a 10-year design planning phase right now. If those technologies do accelerate and they do become proven, we're open ears and like, we're talking with Flagstaff Water Group. We're trying to educate ourselves. We're talking with our consultants about emerging technologies and processes. So I guess to answer that was we're going to be flexible. I don't know if Lee wants to add anything to that.
No, thank you, Mac. I think you covered it. We'll keep open minds. And like I said at council the other night, is we are, looking for a way to build a plant that the operators can operate and meet our Class A plus standards, and also spend the taxpayers' money in an efficient way.
I guess it's kind of a timing issue. How far deep into the process do you go before you get to the point of investing enough money so that you're committed to one direction? See what I'm saying? What point in this process will that happen?
As for like a new plant, with this process, I don't think we're going to identify specific. We're looking at options and going to see how that works on our biosolids. If we were to move forward and design a new plant, look for some input from Doug, but I'm thinking it's a 2 to 3 year planning and designing exercise and maybe a 2-year construction window.
I'd say at least, yeah, maybe a little more than that.
Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, within, I would say the next 7 to 8 years, we would probably be identifying what that treatment process looks like.
Any more questions? Rob?
Yes, thank you, Ron. I've just a small list of questions. One of them is that when this project was first presented, I think over a year ago, there was a description that over half the cost of the project was actually involved in the analysis of the SCADA system and so forth. And we didn't hear anything about the SCADA study in this presentation. And can you give us a thumbnail sketch of what's, where the SCADA part of this study stands? At the time this was presented, I was amazed that half the cost of the study was involved in SCADA, and would love to hear where that stands.
Yeah, so I'm not sure. I don't think it's half. I agree with you. There is a large portion that is going to SCADA. SCADA is not in my wheelhouse. I'm not sure if Doug's up to speed. I can get back to you on that too. I can talk to our SCADA manager and touch base with Hazen on that if you'd like.
Okay, is it fair to assume that'll be part of the final report, though?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so that part of the study is ongoing.
Yes.
Okay. The second, a lot of the discussion has been about an upgraded or replaced Wildcat Hill plant. Do you now envision that will be on the same footprint as the existing plant, or will that be on a new footprint or an adjacent footprint? Do you think that can be replaced in modular fashion? What's the vision about that at this point?
Yeah, so it's something we've been talking a lot with internally, operators, talking to consultants. I think we've got both options, or even 3 options. We could probably use some of the current infrastructure there to bring in like MBR. We could bring in a phased modular, or we could just go with a full decommission of Wildcat and bring a whole new plant online. So there's different options to approach that.
Okay, so this study is not resolving that particular question?
No, I wouldn't say so. No.
I would say off the cuff that Wildcat is in a great location. It's at a, a low spot in the city. We have a great sewer shed in that direction, and there is space between the existing plant and the DLD to construct a new plant. We might have to move some of the solar panels around, but there is real estate there for the construction of a new plant.
Yeah, I understand gravity still works, so it's a
Yeah.
good location. I just didn't know whether there was a perception that this could actually be replaced in place or whether it needs to be a new footprint.
Yeah, I think like
Footprint
Ma-
would be on, yeah, I'm sorry. We have the property and the correct elevations, as Lee said, at Wildcat, which is great. I think what's up for discussion is whether it's phased, if there's new emerging technologies where it's modular and we slowly phase that in. Do we use some of the existing concrete structure with MBR? Or like I said before, is it a full decommission on Wildcat? And I think some of the asset assessment through this will help us kind of evaluate, what our capital investment is, whether that's a phased or a full decommission.
Um, I guess relating to that, you said there's plenty of questions still to resolve. Can you give us the or can you give me perhaps the big picture of where in the process of studies and engineering studies, or what point in the process does this particular study represent? Is this at the beginning? Is this going to identify the right biological process and then engineering studies from there, or is this just, how far along the way does this study take us?
I mean, I would say this is providing us options. So it's kind of educating our staff and our operators on what that process could look like. So, I mean, I put it at 0% almost as we talk about a 10-year horizon for a new design on a new plant.
Okay, so we should expect more studies of this type. After this one is complete, there will be, there are more miles to go in the study process.
Yeah, I mean, so like Doug had brought up, there's three processes that we're targeting right now. I would say if another process technology comes up in the future and it's proven, there may be an assessment on that if it looks promising.
Do you plan to down select to one out of these three as a result of this study?
Yes.
Okay, so you would run with that. Oh, okay, got it. It's been often discussed, at least loosely, that I've heard, and I don't know the details, but that the city of Flagstaff is facing a biosolids capacity limit. And that's one thing that gives a sense of urgency to this study and, the timetable that we're on. Can you state where we are with respect to a biosolids limit and whether we're in any jeopardy of that, bringing a limit to development in the city, those types of things that are, kind of some of the horror stories, you might say, that are dangled out there, and that we're told that the city of Williams has run into?
Yeah. I can't give you an exact percentage where we are at biosolids capacity. I can tell you that it's on the horizon, it's coming. And one project that Doug mentioned was the biosolids handling at Rio. That's going to be a big solution to that biosolids challenge. When we look at that, I think we're seeing 40 to 50% reduction in biosolids over at Wildcat. We are in 60% design review for that right now. So we're trying to bring that on as quick as we can over at the Rio plant.
Again, not knowing any better, is quick as we can, quick enough? In other words, bringing that on as quick as we can, is that 2 years out, 3 years out, 4 years out?
I would put it in the 2 to 3 year window. We're looking at lead times right now for some of the electric controls, the dryer units, and whatnot. Once those get established, we'll have like a construction schedule. But I put it in the 2 to 3 year window before it's online.
Okay, and that's okay with respect to the biosolids capacity limits?
Yes, yeah.
We can get in under the wire there.
Yeah.
I guess a final question. In the past half year, I'd say some of us heard, at least in casual conversations, that there was some new information that the landfill, our Flagstaff City landfill, was able to or willing to accept so-called unclassified biosolids, which would provide an outlet for biosolids coming out of, I presume, either one of the um, water treatment plants. Has that been communicated to the consultants, and does that influence, the options they're looking at for handling of biosolids? And I'm asking that because that seems, if it's real and if it's possible, that seems an awfully cheap way to handle biosolids.
Yeah, and maybe Doug can help me out with that. We've talked that a little bit. I believe ADEC allows unclassified solids to go to the landfill as fill. But you're also looking at a lot of operation costs and hauling there at that liquid percentage.
So I guess, Doug, that is knowledge that you folks have as part of the study team, and that's at least one thing you're taking into account.
Yes, that's a consideration. The regulations allow dewatered municipal biosolids to be landfilled, basically regardless of their quality, actually, as long as they don't have freely draining liquid. So a typical dewatering operation is way less than what this dryer at Rio is going to do would make that standard. And number of utilities do use that option, but it does come with a cost because landfills charge what it takes to operate, and that is expensive.
Yeah, and we've
Depends on the situation.
And we've talked about that, like what Doug said too. If you pass a paint filter test, you can take it to the landfill for fill. But that's, I don't know, is that 18 to 20% solids when you get through paint filter?
15 to 18.
15 to 18. Where if we look at the
It
dry,
looks pretty wet, but it'll
Yeah.
pass.
Yeah, so if you talk about hauling and volumes, it's significantly higher as if we put it through a dryer and we start approaching 90% solids.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure.
Thanks, Rob. Any other questions? Go ahead, John.
As you had told us, we already know there are PFAS compounds in the biosolids, and the question is will that be a problem regulatorily speaking, or just safety wise down the road by putting it in the landfill? Would be one question that I know it's just a question we really can't answer probably right now, but so what do you think about the issues with that? And
Yeah.
there was a grant that was written by Sustainability to create a biochar plant here in town, which would eliminate that hazard. Once you get that biochar up to high enough temperature, it destroys all the other contaminants, including PFAS. Is there any consideration for that in a new combined approach to dealing with the solids?
I can, I guess, talk about the biochar. And I think we'd be open to that right now, depending on, we'd look at capital costs and what right now, but right now we're focusing most of our capital costs the next couple of years on biosolids handling. So yeah, and the Shinsi dryers is probably a good precursor to feed with the biochar. We know we have partners with the Forest Service that have plenty of green waste that can mix with the biochar as well. So I think it is an option and something we'll probably explore more in the future.
Just to add to that, Douglas County, Colorado, will be implementing a biochar unit in the near future. We have plans with Sustainability and Wildland Fire to go up there and check it out next summer to see what kind of hiccups they run into and how it's working and what we can do to maximize it here.
Can I add one more comment? There's a lot of activity in the wastewater industry trying to figure out ways to destroy PFAS right now, biochar certainly being among that. Not just on the wastewater side, but even on the drinking water side, landfill is really kind of the best option right now for a lot of situations because landfills are lined. They have leachate control systems. So the concept is they don't leak, right? That they're double contained. And so whatever PFAS is in there should in principle not leak out. Second thing is, of all the stuff that's in a landfill, your municipal sludge is a very small fraction of all the PFAS that's in there, and all the Teflon pans that have been thrown away, and the microwave popcorn bags, and every other consumer product that's laced with PFAS. And so, that's some of the perspective sometimes that comes into play. We're worrying about and there have been some episodes that are of concern with biosolids and having PFAS, but typical landfills is loaded with PFAS from more sources than you can even imagine. So just a little perspective on that.
Not the only thing it's loaded up with. The other issue was that during flood events, the 14 versus the 6.3 million gallons per day, and you were referring to this too. Is there, I don't have really good understanding of the volume of like the anaerobic digester system and all that. Could that be used somehow to increase the capacity to holding, or is that not even useful idea?
So the one incident that Doug had talked about, I think that is an extreme case. Just to start, that was from the year where we had the records, the snowpack, and we had the rain, the early rain. So that is an extreme example. The volume, I would say, when you're doing 12 to 15 MGD, I don't know what the storage size would look like for that, but
6 million gallons a day times 30 days. They were over permit for almost a month.
I guess we're not going to store that much water or process it slower. You're not going to be able to handle it really. Dilution is the solution, I guess.
That's why we're chasing it upstream to see where it's coming from as a solution. It's fairly inexpensive. The little sensors only cost a couple $100, and you drop them in, you go back and pick them up 6 months later and download the data.
If you do find these sources of water that's getting into the sewer system, is there a thought about building retention basins that could be used to, I don't even know if you want to put this water, facilitate getting it into groundwater, but is that a thought?
If we can find a point source, we have some hunches as to where it's coming from with a storm sewer connected to the sanitary sewer. If we can find that, then we will, work with the owner of that property to not do that anymore. We'll shunt the stormwater off to the proper area rather than having it go down the sanitary sewer.
Anything else, John? Okay.
Maybe one more, if I may?
Go ahead.
Yeah, and I guess this is really a question for Councilmember Sweet. With all the discussion of PFAS and the discussion we just had of concerns about PFAS going to landfills, and landfills that are in theory lined and so forth as a relatively safe repository for that type of thing, has the council ever decided it would like to look and do an analysis of PFAS and potentially other contaminants that might be on the dedicated land disposal site that we have, and potential leachate from that site, which represents an accumulation of roughly 40 years of depositing solids in one place.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was taking a note during the beginning of your question, Commissioner Vane. Are you asking about moving the DLD soil to the landfill in some way or another?
No, actually, I wasn't referring to that. I was just referring to the very basic first step of just analyzing what's there to know whether we do have a problem or we don't. So I don't know that, just for the record, I don't know that we do have a problem. It's just, it's certainly a point of concern, though, that I think the council may want to consider looking into.
We conducted T-clip testing last year to see if it would be appropriate to take to the landfill, but we did not test it for PFAS.
And on my end, I've been on council 5 years. I don't recall this conversation coming to us. I do think moving into the future, we'll be needing to talk.
Thank you, Rob. Any more questions? I think we've had some really good questions, and most of them have kind of touched on some of the things that I had on my mind as well. Um, PFAS is something, we've been focusing on drinking water now for the last couple of years, and now we're seeing that we can have absolutely no PFAS in our drinking water, and we still have it in our wastewater. And it's coming back to bite us. So I don't know. I guess it's all going to depend on, how the emerging regulatory requirements come out on that in the future as far as how that's going to impact our treatment requirements and what we're going to need to do to meet our permit at the Wildcat and the Rio de Flag plants. The one other comment that I had about the alternative processes that we're looking at in this process, those three alternatives potentially, as John mentioned, there may be something else that, as time goes by that we may want to look at a little closer. But I would just hope in our evaluation criteria that we keep in mind the ease of incorporating the construction activities for that process into the existing plant that's still going to be online and it's still going to have to be meeting its permit for that 2 years or whatever it takes to make those modifications. Because I know going through that in the past with some modifications to plants, it can be stressful going through that for sure. So I would just hope that we have that criteria involved in our evaluation of those processes.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. All right. No more questions. With that, thank you very much, Mac and Doug. Good presentation, and we look forward to seeing where we go from here.
Thanks for the time. Thanks for the questions.
Thank you. Okay, going on to old business, we have none. Informational items to and from the chair, commission members, or staff. We'll go around the commission for any information.
Nothing from me.
Nothing? Uh,
Nothing.
Matthew?
Nothing.
We're going to have I'm just going to add, we're going to have a busy month next month, I think. We've got the Pine Canyon tour coming up on October 6th. For those of you that are going to be able to attend that. I understand that we've been invited to an executive session with the council on October 21st. And October 23rd, a joint Water Commission and Council meeting to talk about the Red Gap Ranch work that's going on with reclamation. Will that take the place of the regular Water Commission meeting next month in October, do you know, or will we still have a Water Commission meeting October 16th?
We'll likely still have the regular meeting on the 16th. We have a couple of things on the agenda that aren't regarding Red Gap Ranch. Unless you would like to push it out as the chair, push it out to November.
If we have items we need to discuss, I'm fine with it. I was just curious. It is going to be a busy month for the commission. Okay. Lee, do you have anything?
I do. Andreas sent an email out earlier, and I'll just read it so that it's on the record here. So we've had some movement with Pine Canyon. So here's the email. I'll just read it to you so I don't leave anything out. Dear Commissioners, I would like to inform you of and invite you to the City Council work session next week on the 23rd of September. There will be two agenda items that may be of interest to you. One is the J.W. Powell update from the Engineering and Planning Department divisions, and an update regarding John Wesley Powell and the discussion of an amended agreement regarding reclaimed water for Pine Canyon. This is in regards to the new development that Pine Canyon had a public hearing about earlier in the summer, and it involves 4 new acres of irrigated turf on the parcel adjacent to the existing Pine Canyon neighborhood. Because this is an amendment to an existing agreement that doesn't involve the construction of a new system, the item will not be going before the Water Commission for recommendation to City Council. The council meeting will be your opportunity to voice your opinion as a community resident during the public comment period. I'm available for discussion at any time you'd like to reach out to me, and I will be at the meeting.
Thanks, Lee. And that's September 23rd.
Correct.
Council meeting. Okay. Councilor Sweet, do you have anything?
I don't. It is going to be a very busy month or a couple of few weeks.
Okay, I don't know if anybody else from staff has anything they want to bring up. If not, hearing none, it's about, 17 minutes after 5, and we will go ahead and adjourn. Thank you all for attending.